So many amazing animated movies have come from Pixar, it's really hard to choose a favorite, and since the company's inception, there have been 17 films released and 6 titles currently in production for the years to come. That's a whole lot of stories, and each one is very unique in its own way. Hey everyone, I'm Justin with Channel Frederator, and in this episode of Cartoon Conspiracy, we're going to be taking a look at the hotly debated Pixar theory that does try to fit all of the Pixar movies in the same timeline. Are you ready? I am. Here we go. So for longtime viewers of Channel Frederator, you'll recall that our series' first host, Emily, actually covered the original Pixar theory back in 2014, and since then, 3 years have passed and so many more movies have been released and tied into this theory. 3 huge movies, Inside Out, The Good Dinosaur, and Finding Dory. These 3 movies change up the timeline and narrative, giving the theory a new starting point, and if you recall, the original theory actually kicked things off with Brave, but since then, The Good Dinosaur came out and things actually start there now. John Negroni, author of the Pixar Theory, states that The Good Dinosaur kicks off 65 million years ago when dinosaurs ruled the Earth. In our reality, it's widely believed that an asteroid crashed into Earth and destroyed all of the dinosaurs before humans ever actually entered the picture, but Pixar throws that completely out of the window and gives us a different scenario. Like, what if there was no asteroid, or what if the asteroid already hit Earth pre-dinosaur era and the dinosaurs are actually living post-destruction? Very interesting questions. So in The Good Dinosaur, we see that scenario play out as humans and dinosaurs live side by side on the same planet. In this world, humans aren't the most intelligent creatures on the planet, as seen by the behavior in the movie. The dinosaurs are far more intelligent. They farm and do other work that humans actually do in our reality, but in The Good Dinosaur, the humans are the wild, feral creatures. We're almost certain that the lands were once filled with food and resources for them, but Negroni states that this world is a shifted environment. All the resources seem to have disappeared by the time we meet our main character, Arlo, just as if the asteroid did smash into Earth years earlier. As The Good Dinosaur continues, we see that the world has become less habitable and almost unlivable at this point. Over the years, the mammals are taking all of the food that's left and their species begins to thrive, so everything is kind of working backwards here. How does all of this tie into the theory? Well, do you remember the movie Up? I mean, you should if you've seen it. That opening is, pretty heart-wrenching. At the start of Up, we see the famous explorer Charles Muntz discover a place in South America inhabited by all kinds of different plants and animal species, which at this point was undiscovered by science, and this place we know as Paradise Falls, or The Lost World, as the narrator states. In addition to this crazy discovery, Muntz actually discovers the unique bird Kevin, and if you recall, there are very similar birds and creatures that bear a shocking resemblance to Kevin in The Good Dinosaur, which confirms that they share a universe. In his book, Negroni mentions that there was actually information cut from Up stating why and how Charles Muntz was still active and healthy, but older than the 80-year-old main character, Carl Fredricksen. Pixar actually came out and stated that Muntz found Kevin's eggs, and these eggs possess magic, a magic that normal people and animals can take advantage of and do great things with, like give them superpowers. It doesn't really seem like a coincidence that Muntz finds Kevin's eggs in the 1930s, just a couple decades before The Incredibles story, and The Incredibles takes place in an alternate version of the 1950s and 60s. And if we think about this for a second, Mr. Incredible must have been extremely young or just born around the time that Muntz discovered these eggs and their magical abilities, and don't worry, we'll return to The Incredibles in just a second. The Good Dinosaur is not only the new starting point of this revised theory, but the rest of the argument simply couldn't exist without it. It shows the absence of the meteor crashing into the Earth and the magic eggs found in the lands, which do stem from the eggs that were found, leading to animals becoming as intelligent as humans and sometimes even surpassing them. This magic is extremely important and key to this theory, but one thing that hasn't been proven about this magic is the fact that it can make people and animals immortal. And a lot of you guys might be saying, Justin, what makes you say that? Well, fossils and fuels. And what needs fuel? Cars. If you remember in Cars 2, the character Axelrod actually makes a point to say that they get oil from fossils, or as he specifically says, dead dinosaurs. See what we're getting at here? In the Cars 2 film, automobiles are quickly running out of fuel because by 2105, mankind has grown to a population of over 200 billion. That's a lot of people. This very number and this statistic was actually stated in WallE, so if the population increase caused a need for more fuel, and since the dinosaurs in this theory died out more gradually versus all at once, there's not going to be much fossil fuel left, so naturally people are going to have to find new ways to harness power. Which brings us back to The Incredibles and how technology has progressed so fast in that time period, and this is likely due to the fact that the characters in the Pixar universe have discovered new ways of power. If you recall in The Incredibles, the main baddie Syndrome says that he has found a new way to tap into 0-point energy and human energy. Interesting. Which will end up coming from toys and monsters and therefore be limitless. Syndrome never brings up fossil fuels, maybe because they've already been exhausted? However, these two new forms of energy aren't the only new forms of energy that sprout up. In WallE, characters have figured out a way to harness solar power energy, seeing that they live on spaceships for years at a time. With a world that is rapidly discovering new sources of power, fossil fuels are being left in the past, and it could be why humans seem to be outliving everything else around them, such as the vehicles and cars, and the dinosaurs from the Good Dinosaur are completely wiped out by now, and this is a new era that Negroni pens as the modern Pixar era. It's a new time period, but the past isn't forgotten, and that's why companies like DinoCo start popping up, and judging by the name alone, you guys can probably catch the reference. With a name like DinoCo hinting back to the dinosaurs, they actually also have a dinosaur in their logo. Pretty cool stuff. So jumping back to where the Good Dinosaur ends, Brave begins. In Brave, main character Merida finds out that there is this strange magic and that she can solve a lot of her problems with it. So she uses it, but accidentally turns her mom into a bear. This new weird magic allows humans to change species, solve huge problems, and lets inanimate objects become alive and interact with the world around them. Toy Story, Cars, anyone? But in Brave, we find out that there is also this witch, a witch that uses magic and travels through wooden doors. This witch experiments on these animals with that magic, and years later all of these animals have interbred, making a new army of animals that are very human-like, and they have a rapid level of growing intelligence. During this time period, there are two different but very similar roads of progression: the growing levels of natural beings and also that of machines. Animals, as we stated, are extremely human-like at this point. They can talk and interact with the world around them, like the lovable Pixar rodent Remy. In Ratatouille, we see that the mouse Remy is completely aware and can communicate, not to humans, but he wants to cook, which is something that humans only usually do. So Remy gets started, does his thing, and starts to cook, and he actually gets pretty great at it, which then leads to the movie's main antagonist, Chef Skinner. Skinner discovers the knowledge that animals can now do human activities, but then he disappears, and where does he go? What does he do with this newfound information? Well, it's completely possible that Charles Muntz from Up was tipped off from Chef Skinner from Ratatouille with this newfound information and started digging deeper into his own personal well of knowledge. He started looking into these various devices that allow him to get inside the minds of animals, such as the very collar that Doug the dog wears in Up, which, if you remember, allows him to speak. These collars show Muntz that animals are smarter than everyone thinks and that something is truly happening with them. Muntz used these collars and the intelligence of a canine, combined them, and found the very exotic bird in South America that he's been looking for years: Kevin. But the story of Charles Muntz is never really resolved, seeing that he kind of just Disney died. After all this has happened, the animals that he did experiments on were set free. He doesn't need them anymore. So with all of these animals being released into the world and given control, we see this distaste build between humans and animals, as humans realize that they aren't the top dogs anymore. Yes, pun completely intended. Meanwhile, there is a huge industrial revolution taking place that is hinted at in Up. At the beginning of Up, our main character Carl is forced to give away his house to a company, as if the poor old man hasn't been through enough already. But the company he ends up handing over his home to is By and Large, or as it's commonly seen as B&L. By and Large is this massive company that starts to encompass and take over the world. By and Large is actually brought up in a news article in Finding Nemo that talks about this amazing underwater world, obviously drawing interest to the fact that there is intelligent life in deep, dark places of the ocean. And if you remember, at this point, humans are becoming aware that they aren't alone when it comes to higher intelligence. Negroni uses Dory as an example. She is seemingly different than all the other fish, and that has to do with her level of intelligence. If you've seen Finding Nemo and Finding Dory, you know her huge problem with short-term memory loss. And this could be another hint suggesting that the intelligent beings besides humans are rising. amazing. On a side note, we also just want to point out that the WallE calendar can be seen for a very split second in the background of the Hank and Dory escape scene in Finding Dory, as well as the very legendary Pizza Planet truck that can be seen in the background of a few scenes, which, as we all know, are huge references to Toy Story. But that WallE calendar is more than just a reference. It proves that at this time, the very first WallE robots were being prototyped, or maybe even in the beginning phases of use. So far, this is the farthest that the animal side of the theory has been developed, but with machines and AI, we're just getting started. Da-da-da-da, in comes the Incredibles. Remember how at the very start of all of this, we said that the tech was so far into the future in the Incredibles, and that they had to harness power in new ways? Well, this holds true because Syndrome actually doesn't have superpowers. He uses technology. He's a really smart character and creates a giant AI killbot that can replicate the powers and moves of anyone to ever exist. And actually thinking about that, that's terrifying. Speaking of terrifying, the AI killbot eventually turns on Syndrome and tries to take him down. And other inanimate objects begin doing the same thing to other superheroes in the universe, seemingly by accident. Magic giving inanimate objects the ability to interact with the world around them. Seems like it's all coming together here. So what's the deal with all of this? Why do these machines, inanimate objects, and robots want to start a war with the human race and potentially wipe them out? Well, here comes Toy Story. In Toy Story, people can be seen throwing away and getting rid of sentient inanimate objects, and even just saying that sounds completely insane, like a giant black hole is going to open up and just suck us all inside. But over the course of the first 3 Toy Story movies, these toys and characters start to get really sick and tired of how they're being mistreated by humans. And at the same time, Pixar shows that the toys aren't really the biggest fans of humans, especially when all of the toys gang up on Sid in the very first Toy Story movie. Or if we jump over to Toy Story 3 and look at the character Lotso, who has this like giant overwhelming hatred for humans. He's had enough. The story of Toy Story takes place in the time period between the 90s to about 2010, so if we think about this, more than enough time has passed for all of these different AI machines to create the giant that is B&L, further proving that all of these toys and machines are ready to start an all-out battle on mankind. But this theory suggests that the machines didn't want to outright take over the planet because that would be beyond obvious, so they created the faceless company that is By and Large, which is actually a really smart decision, and we can see this going into play in the 60s when the giant Omnidroid fails to take down the all-powerful Incredibles. I guess you could say they're pretty incredible. But at the end of the day, humans still need to rely on machines, and the toys from Toy Story still need to rely on humans. If the toys are put away in storage, they'll basically die because no one would be interacting with them. It's actually this really weird circle, so to keep this circle active, machines find a way to control humans by fulfilling their every need in the giant corporation that is B&L. With all of these machines active and working, pollution starts to become a huge problem, so the animals actually start to rise up and have beef with humans. Since animals are now super smart, they could possibly overthrow humans who now need someone to save them, and who could that be? Well, none other than the machines, good old By and Large. As all of the pollution completely takes over, Earth is now unlivable for humans and animals, so the humans that are left are brought to the spaceship called Axiom, which exists in WallE. This is basically like a last-ditch effort to save the human race once and for all. While on the Axiom, humans are pampered and all of their wants and needs are fulfilled. So with all of this going on, humans are now completely dependent on these machines and treated like toys. Once again, the tables have turned. Jumping back down to Earth, the only thing that is left to populate it are cars, which we see both in Cars 1 and Cars 2. Cars 3 could possibly change this, but we're just going to have to wait and see with that one. The cars in Cars recognize human tradition and landmarks, not forgetting the past, and in Cars 2, our group of vehicular characters make their way over to Japan and Europe, making it more than obvious that these movies do indeed take place on Earth. In the movie WallE, we learned that the humans were going to come back down to Earth after the pollution lessened at some point, but B&L just couldn't get the job done, and over time, a lot of those machines died out, though we don't really know how. Yet. But one thing that is known is that in Cars 2, there is a serious need for energy. They try to find this energy, but they just can't do it. There's a new company, though, on the block called All in All, and a fan pointed out that All in All and By and Large basically mean the same thing, drawing WallE and Cars a little bit closer. So All in All is trying to convert all of these gas-powered cars to electric in order to have a new clean way to live and to cut back on pollution. But when introducing this new green energy, this could have caused a fuel war in order to turn cars away from something that they've been using for years: oil. And during this war, this could have killed off a huge population of cars by cars not wanting to switch over to the green energy and by not having any fuel. Machines are powered by fuel, which brings us back to WallE. People have asked why WallE is the only machine left and what happened to everyone else around him. Well, 800 years after the Axiom leaves Earth, WallE is a machine that's left, and if you remember, thrives off emotions and remembers a better time, a time where humans and machines lived in peace and harmony. All of this keeps him alive, and he's a very special character because of it and extremely important to this theory. His drive is kept alive by the memories that he had and interactions that he has currently with his little cockroach friend. And that does sound very similar to how all of these characters have to keep relying on each other because they have to. It's their drive, their motivation, it keeps them looking forward. WallE does his best to liberate the humans and build a society back on Earth, but if you recall, during the credits of WallE, something huge is revealed. We see that the last remaining source of plant life is actually in a boot that is buried underground and sprouts up into a giant tree. What's so important about this tree, you might ask? Well, this tree looks awfully familiar to the one that we see in A Bug's Life. Now Negroni explains that since humanity, machines, and animals eventually learn to live in harmony, a new species comes into existence: monsters. He also says that the planet in which the monsters in Monsters University inhabit is Earth, but in the extremely distant future. But where did these monsters come from? Well, these monsters could actually be the personified mutations from all of the pollution on Earth, and if we remember, Earth was a solid mess for like 800 years. So possibly after WallE, all of the animals mutated and came back as monsters, as we see in both Monsters Inc. and Monsters University. Monsters Inc. also follows a very familiar formula that's riddled all the way throughout this theory. In their story, the monsters are in the middle of a huge energy crisis. Sound familiar? If you've seen the movie, you know that the monsters depend on humans for their main source of energy, notably human screams, which, thinking about in retrospect, is pretty terrifying. Thanks to the almighty machines, the day is saved once again, allowing monsters to travel through mechanized doors, leading them to different places, such as the human world. And keep that in mind, it's not a different dimension either, at least according to this theory. Through these mechanized doors, the monsters now have the ability to travel along the Pixar timeline, and they travel back to the time before humans were taken up to spaceship Axiom. The monsters know that humans have an expiration date and are therefore trying to collect as many screams as possible so they don't go extinct themselves. While collecting all of these screams, the monsters discover something called green energy. Sound familiar? A new source of power that doesn't involve scaring kids anymore. It's actually about making them laugh. And with all of this going on, enter Inside Out and character Bing Bong. Bing Bong was actually tasked with making kids laugh because of his lovable appearance and personality. In a separate theory that ties in with this theory, so I guess you could say it's a theoryception, it's assumed that instead of scaring Riley, he actually became her imaginary friend, a distant memory. There's conflict with this because Riley actually makes an appearance in Finding Dory, but a similar situation could have occurred. But this new green energy does sound a lot like All in All from Cars, right? Well, yeah, but the connections with Monsters Inc. don't actually end there. There's a tie-in with A Bug's Life as well. Take note of the mobile home that appears in both movies. The one from A Bug's Life is a little bit older and run down, whereas the one from Monsters Inc. looks newer and is actually inhabited by humans, possibly confirming that A Bug's Life is in the distant future and Monsters Inc. is in the past, which makes the whole time travel thing a bit more likely. But it ain't over yet. Remember Boo, the small girl from Monsters Inc., and if you've seen the movie, you know that she's pretty sad when everything's said and done. She grows up and becomes obsessed with the memory of her good friend Sully and wants to find out what happened to him. She keeps the knowledge of door traveling in the back of her mind because if we remember, it's what led her to Sully in the first place. But with all of this on her mind, it actually drives her mad and turns her into a witch. Yes, the same witch that is in Brave. And also the same witch that can travel through doors because of her use of magic that was found in the Good Dinosaur. Pretty neat stuff and one crazy full circle. Driving this Boo the Witch point home even further is the obvious carving of Sully and the Pizza Planet truck that is also next to the trailer in Monsters Inc. This all sounds fine and dandy, right? But let's just see how this theory holds up in the breakdown. So as I was researching this theory like a madman, I ran into a few different posts trying to shut it down, close up shop, put it out of business. A lot of people came at Negroni telling him that there were so many different things wrong with it, but he shut them all down with the following arguments. The first is the complaint that the trailer in A Bug's Life should be gone, dust, but Negroni said, I disagree, based on how barely intact all the other buildings are in WallE. Also, a really common complaint is the argument that the toys aren't actually machines, but they don't need to be if we look back at The Incredibles and Syndrome's statement about zero-point energy. This is some sort of crazy electromagnetic energy that is in a vacuum and travels through wavelengths, which if we think about, this kickstarts the toy's life and they are then sustained by humans. So the third large plot hole is the lack of proper explanation of what happens to humans. Negroni's answer to that was, I haven't settled on a theory I really like yet. I'm leaning more towards the idea that monsters and machines eventually forget that they need humans and get rid of them again, not realizing their mistake until all humans die out. And another explanation is that humans couldn't survive on Earth anymore, which is obviously referring back to the mass pollution that starts when B&L begins to take over, which, putting into perspective, ties this theory up in a really interesting way. Unfortunately, there are still quite a few questions swirling online about the proper placement of the movies in this theory. Maybe a lot of these questions could be answered in the upcoming Pixar movies Cars 3 or maybe even Coco. We really do wonder how these two movies are going to affect this theory as a whole, and with all the other Pixar movies that are going to be released in the upcoming years and future. While this theory does have a lot of information to take in at one time, it's crazy to see how much thought goes into it, and with all the information that we do have currently, we have no other option but to rate this theory 3 Luxo Juniors out of 5. But that's just what we think. We want to hear what you guys think of this theory, so leave us a comment in the comment section down below and let us know. Do you buy into the theory? Do you think it's true? Do you think it's false? Let us know. And while you're down there in the comment section, if there's a theory that we haven't covered here on Channel Frederator, leave us a comment, let us know, and we'll check it out. And don't forget to subscribe to Channel Frederator to stay current on all future episodes of Cartoon Conspiracy that do air every week. Hit that little bell icon to be notified when new episodes go live and to become part of that awesome notification squad. As always, I'm Justin, aka Scoutfly, and don't forget, Frederator loves you.